It's finally time, ladies and gentlemen. Outriders, a game so anticipated that even your grandma is talking about it, is finally among us. It's the new target in the sights of the Destiny Killer title, and it has arrived to let you cup its balls while it coughs some wisdom into your hands. So this is the first review I've done in quite some time now, and it's all thanks to Square Enix, who were kind enough to supply me with a key for the game, so thank you for that. And I do have to mention that not only because I'm extremely grateful, but because I also want to remain completely transparent with you guys, because I know some people lose their underwear at the moment they hear free copy just so that they can comment shill and feel great about themselves. And whilst we're at it, I may as well tell you pretty much everything I dislike about Outriders. Now, first of all, I'm not going to be bringing up the server issues at launch. I know you probably want me to, but it's not what I'm going to be doing in this video, because I'm sure in 5 months from now that isn't going to be an issue. But what I will mention is the poor optimization issues. For a game which was delayed numerous times and ran a month-long demo, the optimization issues encountered not just on my end but numerous others with Outriders are just plain ridiculous. If you're not seeing missing textures in cutscenes, or low frame rate in random areas, or audio clipping or cutting out, you're crashing. And boy, are you ever fucking crashing. Let me tell you that right now. On day 1 I crashed 9 times in just 1 hour. That's 9 crashes in 1 hour, and they all happened during cutscenes or during menu, not even during gameplay. And it's not like this was new stuff that they could have potentially not had as much QA on. No, this is stuff from the demo, stuff that I'd been looking at for a month with no issue. Or even if it wasn't cutscenes or menu screens, it was something like opening a door. Something as simple as opening a door was enough to crash the game. I tried every possible fix given by Outriders. I tried rolling back the drivers, I tried lowering settings, running it on DX12, DX11, but the crashes still persisted, as did the frame drops. Now, the only reason why I do want to mention stuff like this is because Borderlands 3 also suffered from the same kind of issues at launch and still did over 8 months later, so I think it's important to lay that down now. Although what I will say is that these crashes, mine included, are mostly happening on PC, and console, from what I've heard, actually seems to be largely okay at hand, so I think that's a plus. But again, I did just want to bring up the crashes because in my opinion they are an important issue to shed light on, and if you're thinking of getting the game close to release, you might want to hold off for a little bit if that's something that really bothers you. Nevertheless, the second issue I have with Outriders is a little more tame, and I'm sure is going to vary depending on who you ask, but for me it's the difficulty. And I know what you're already saying, and trust me, I love difficulty in a game. So when Outriders showcased an increased difficulty in the demo, I was extremely overjoyed, but I'm gonna be totally honest, some of the enemies in this game hit far too hard at any point in your playthrough. Some mini-bosses do also, but those are more understandable. However, there's been times where during a normal mobbing section, I've been one-shotted by snipers, or in some areas, I've been taken out by one attack of a flying enemy. Also, some of the health on these enemies just make no sense. Like straight up, an Alpha Perfora, which is basically a massive extinction-looking alien thing, takes like 2 shotgun shots with twisted rounds to kill for me, yet a fucking fly can take up to 4. I don't get it. I really do not get it. And again, do bear in mind that this is all subject to change player to player, of course, but in my experience, the enemy health and damage just felt so pointless and unreasonable and inconsistent at the worst of times. Now, the most common response to this is of course just turn down your world tier level, but this doesn't actually solve the issue with the difficulty in the game, because if players want to play at the highest levels, they're still going to inevitably run into these things either way. And the only other thing that I can think of for now that I didn't like in Outriders was, understandably and most predictable, the story. And I just want to be fully clear on this when I say that I do not care about a story in a game like Outriders, nor did I expect a jaw-droppingly good one. But I do want to bring this up for those of you who do, because let me just say, the side missions in Outriders are infinitely more interesting, less forgettable, and less sleep-inducing compared to the main missions. The main storyline in Outriders is so incredibly dull that I actually forgot what most of it even was halfway through. The characters that the game introduces are done in such a way that you say hello to them in one cutscene, and then in the next cutscene you're asking who they are because you've forgotten who they are. In fact, the only characters that I ever really remembered were the ones introduced at the start of the game. And what makes this even worse is that they're some of the most bland characters in the lineup. The actual interesting characters with a backstory introduced later on in the game when I had more time to focus were the ones I ended up not caring about. But as I said a second ago, luckily for you, the side missions in this game are legitimately fun and interesting to do. You know, they're not like other games' side missions where you just don't want to interact with them at all. I found myself doing nearly all of the side missions during my playthrough without even noticing it. Like, that's how fun they are. But again, I just thought it'd be worth mentioning that the story in Outriders just isn't all that interesting, and if you're going into it expecting a good story, you're going to be disappointed, I think. But moving on to what I like about Outriders, and thankfully there's a lot to break down here. The first one is the gunplay, and I'm going to waste no time here in saying that the gunplay aspect of Outriders has to be easily one of, if not, the cleanest handling systems I have ever used. It feels like every click of the mouse or every reload of my gun has the right amount of weight to it in order to make it feel realistic. But what I love about all of these guns is that they all still feel light enough to where your character can carry them around in true Outrider fashion. I always hate it when games tell me about how strong my character is in comparison to everyone else, and then the gun I'm holding weighs me down like it's made of fucking mahogany. It's just a really nice detail which I appreciated in the demo and more so in the final product, so I don't know, maybe it's not something you're gonna go crazy over, but for me it's a big selling point of the game. Another thing I want to touch on in the final product is just how much of Outriders there is to take in and consume. I want you to listen to me very carefully here when I tell you this. Anyone who claims they have beaten Outriders in 8 hours or less has either A, not taken their time and done the side missions or bounties or any of the collectibles, or B, lied to you. There is so much to do in this game that it is actually kind of frustrating to a degree. The side missions, there's got to be at least 40. It gets to a point where you can't even control the amount of questing you're doing as you go through this magnificent game, just doing everything possible to score as much of the amazing loot. And speaking of the loot itself, there's a shit ton of it. Just buckets upon buckets of amazing loot, which is all dropped at a rate where it still feels special when you see it dropped for the 100th time. It's just a really well done system that rewards your time, rewards your effort, and also gives you the option to change it up should you dislike what it actually is that you're finding. Because the mod system in this game is so damn expansive that you can quite literally take a piece of gear you find and almost entirely turn it into a completely new item if you deem it worthy. It's such a breath of fresh air and such a damn good quality of life change, which ultimately leaves you unable to not compare it to another game's flaws. It's a feature which hasn't been shoehorned in, it's been simmering and brewing for a while to ensure that it's easy to follow, easy to get lost in, and when you're endlessly tinkering with stuff, it's easy not to just spiral off and do some other random shit that you didn't even know you could do. And what I love most is that it makes use of dismantled gear by giving you currency from the stats you dismantle. Sometimes you'll find a piece of gear with a little anomaly symbol or like a little shard symbol next to one of the passives, and if you dismantle the piece of gear, you'll get some points for that passive, which you can then apply to any other piece of gear. It's fucking genius. I really can't stress enough just how good of a job Outriders does at making use of things you've never even thought of making use of before. Now again, back to how big the game is, and it's the endgame expeditions. It's like if I could compare it to anything, maybe Digistruct Peak from Borderlands 2 met Nightfalls from Destiny, and maybe like a little bit of a raid from Division. It's once again an extremely rewarding area that will legitimately cuck you over if you're not careful when you go in. I've almost rage quit and broken my keyboard just because some of these expeditions are so incredibly hard. But I kind of like it, you know, it forces you to think about the character you tackle it with, or sometimes even something as precise as the weapon type or your mod. It's just really refreshing, and it's a true endgame activity. And I can't stress this enough. Outriders does things which very few games are doing today. It's truly refreshing to say the least. And another thing that's refreshing is the environments. Now I'll just go ahead and keep it simple. I cannot stand the Unreal Engine. I think the Unreal Engine is like looking at the contents of a fucking colostomy bag. I've never been a fan of it, but I must say this game is genuinely beautiful. The environments are the definition of immersive, only breaking when you're interrupted by a dumb crash or some other annoying bug that crops up. It's a true trip through a channel of your mind which you never even knew existed before. Each location is unique and is interesting with a vibrant palette which keeps you glued to the screen. The visual effects are engaging. It's all round just simply stunning. And now lastly, I kind of just want to touch on the characters here, and I'll just go ahead and say I'm no real expert on what they do or the most efficient ways to play them. But all in all, I'd say personally all 4 of them felt rather nice to play and all had their own unique abilities and strengths to play into. I didn't play all of them to the end of the game. I've only really done the Trickster to the end and the others kind of like quarter midway through it, but they all felt pretty good. I also felt like the lineup of abilities was pretty nice, as was the speed that you unlock them at. The game gives you enough time to become acquainted with any new skills you unlock before just throwing another one at you, and I really like that. So nothing really crazy to say about them in general. I just felt as though they were all around pretty good, and once again all had something unique about them which, you know, could set them apart in some way. Although I will say that the one complaint I do have regarding the characters is that in co-op you can only have 3 players. Apparently this is due to just how many effects on screen at once affects the performance of the game, but I still think that in a game with 4 classes to play, only being able to utilize 3 of them in a co-op scenario is just ridiculous, so that's something to pay attention to going into Outriders. But all in all, that's gonna do it for my review of Outriders. You know, I don't really have much more to say about the game. I just really enjoyed my experience with a few exceptions here and there. But for this video, I don't actually want to give the game a rating, since it has plenty of room to improve or even decrease in value, so I want to try something different. I want you guys to make your own judgment on the game based off of what you've seen in this video and what you've heard in this video, and then make your judgment on whether or not it's for you. Once again, thank you Square Enix for allowing me a copy of the game, and thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.